Hey friend, do you want to offer meaningful learning solutions that create behavior change, fit in the flow of work, and yield real results for your nonprofit? If yes, this is the podcast for you. Join me as I explore instructional design and leadership development best practices, as well as change management, belonging, and influence. If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I've been in your shoes. I'm a learning and development consultant and founder of Skill Masters Market. Before starting my business, I led learning and leadership development initiatives for a large national nonprofit. I know what it's like to need to develop your staff quickly and effectively and to build the relationships and cut through the organizational layers to be successful. And I'm bringing all of that to you in this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's learning for good. Boundaries, coping skills, conflict resolution, empathy, mental health, self-care. These are skills we all need in life. And the nonprofit Undo Mindset is on a mission to make sure everyone has them. They do this through professional development for educators, learning for K-12 students, at-home support, and more. They're working to build a more resilient, compassionate society. And I don't know about you, but I think we need more of that in the workplace too. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Erin has proudly worked as an educator in 9 different schools. Differing experiences gave Erin the opportunity to truly see a wide range of schools, systems, programs, what was working, and where our gaps are within the educational system. Erin brings her diverse teaching background to each class taught, providing each student with supports needed to meet their diverse needs. One of the greatest gaps Erin has observed in her career is the need to support students with making their thought process a productive and positive experience. She's observed how kids are being exposed to so much adult information and knowledge, but don't have the mindset skills needed to support the thought process that goes with that exposure. She is passionate about teaching kids the skills needed to efficiently bridge this gap within their own thought patterns. After being in a school shooting, Erin sought trauma recovery assistance. Through this process, she learned an immense amount of mental health skills. The problem was that the program she attended was for adults only. Sick of seeing our country's reactive approach to mental health, the idea for Undo was born. Teaching proactive mindset skills so our youth have those tools in their back pockets prior to experiencing crisis. When not pursuing her dreams or working in the education world, Erin can be found exploring the mountains with her family. Originally from DC, Erin, her husband Jeremy, and her 2 children, Logan and Emmy, have been calling Colorado home for a decade. They love to snowboard, ski, hike, mountain bike, raft, camp, do stand-up paddleboarding, and just about every other fun activity the beautiful mountains have to offer. Erin, I'm so excited you wanted to join me on the show today. I can't wait to dive in with you. Welcome.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate it. I'm super excited to be here myself.
I love your experience. I love your focus on education. I love your focus on just those trauma-informed skills that everyone needs and this mindset. I'm really focusing in on mental health. Tell us, I'm always fascinated, how did you get here? I talked a little bit about your education background as an educator, right? But tell us a little bit about your career journey. Why is this important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in the DC area, so I started my educational career out there. Taught a couple of years out in the DC area, uprooted my whole family. We moved to Colorado and moved around in Colorado itself a little bit, which caused me to move around my career a little bit in Colorado as well. But it also gave me so much perspective into our educational system to be able to see schools in the DC area, see schools here in the Colorado area, see schools in different neighborhoods and different counties in the Colorado area. I've literally taught every grade K-8. And then I've taught this program to high schoolers and college age kiddos. So I've really been lucky to have this journey of seeing the entire growth process of humanity and the different developmental stages and the different developmental skills that they're getting access to in their educational experiences. And it's just really been an incredibly educational learning experience for me to both understand, again, human development, but also what are our schools doing and not doing to really support our kids in these ways. Did I answer your question?
You did. No, this is great. Thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting because you do, as you go throughout your career, right, you develop these different perspectives based on your experience. And so you're able to then combine those now in your work with Undo. So tell us a little bit about your nonprofit. What do you do? Who do you serve? That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. My main goal as an educator is always going to be to get into our educational system. 26% of US kids actually experience trauma before the age of 4. So for me, almost mid 30s, I guess, when I went, it was very reactive for me to go into this mental health space and start to learn these skills and tools. I truly believe that trauma is part of the human experience. I don't know if there's a single human that gets to leave this planet without enduring trauma. So we very firmly believe that in equipping our kids with skills and tools so that they understand this trauma, they know how to process this trauma. I think of the trauma as a paper, and if we can file it in our filing cabinets correctly, then we don't have to, when we are older and grayer like me, try to pull off the Band-Aid, try to get that paper out of that filing cabinet, try to smooth it all out, fix those smudges, whatever, and try to put that paper back in our filing cabinets correctly. That's a very reactive approach, and it really doesn't actually help us as much as if we were to embed these skills and tools into our younger folks earlier and help them to develop those skills, again, so that when trauma does happen, they're really able to navigate that trauma really responsibly and in a way that suits them correctly for their rest of their lives. I think that one of my biggest aha moments in this journey is I realized that people, adults in our world, are not aware of what trauma responses are, and they're not aware of how much trauma responses they are living in their day-to-day life. And so I think being able to educate our next gen on that so that they can avoid living the rest of their adult lives in these trauma responses would really be a great opportunity for our whole community and society. So again, my goal is to get into our K-12s. We want to be free and accessible to our students, to our educators, to our home support network, mom, daddy, and uncle, grandma, brother, sister, whoever is raising our kids. I truly believe that we need to play catch up in this way and really bubble wrap our kids in these skills and tools to really break generational trauma. So we want to make sure it's free and accessible for as many people that are in our educational system, to higher ed, you name it. The other thing that I've noticed in my mental health journey as well is that it's truly a privilege. It is something that I know in my own life, I've been in a space where $50 copay once a month was like too much for me to go to therapy. These facilities and stuff, I had to be an adult. I had to be in crisis, like you were saying in my intro. I had to have insurance and $1,600 cash. That is not the reality of most humans on our planet. So we really want to bust that wide open and make mental health skills and tools accessible. Everything we are producing is computer-based programming. It's skills and tools. It's not talk therapy. So it's holistic and it's very adaptable to just about anybody's trauma, no matter what your lived experience is. It's understanding anger in its entirety to understand how you display that anger in your own being, things like that. So we want to make sure that it's free, accessible to incarcerated people who are in incarcerated spaces, really trying to be part of the recidivism problem in our country. We want to be in transient communities. We currently feed 175 transient folks in the Denver area. And we would like to copy and paste that model all over the country of getting our curriculum out to as many transient communities as we can. We do have a second level to that initiative, or second tier of that initiative, in that most people who are in a space of fight, flight, trying to find food and housing aren't necessarily in a space of also addressing their mental health needs. And we recognize that. So another part of that initiative is we would like to bring our computer-based curriculum to our public school libraries across the country as well, knowing that's where the community typically will pivot and shift when they're ready to access those types of resources. We have a partnership with a domestic violence center. We have partnerships with addiction recovery centers. One day we would love to be able to support military and vets. That's probably 3 to 5 years out because we have to become government contractors. My husband's a first responder, so I'm very passionate about our first responder medical professionals initiative. And I always like to share this story about his journey a little bit because I think this is a nuance to mental health that we often don't think about in our country. But as a police officer, he checked himself into the mental health facility as well after I did. And then we were very concerned about his job because how can you have a police officer with a gun going through a mental health crisis? And to which I respond, how can we have a police officer who endures exponentially more trauma than the average human holding a gun and being afraid that they are going to lose their job if they access mental health resources. So it's almost like sometimes in our country, some of these systems are stacked against us to be able to access these resources. And those are the kinds of communities that we really want to make sure that we are able to be a resource for. So again, first responders and medical professionals who endure exponentially more trauma, we want to make sure we're a resource for those folks. And I think that's really, for the most part, it. We do also have a vision of being able to offer our curriculum to corporate offices, to having a subscription model on our website, to having a men's group, a pre-postpartum mom and dad's group, being a curriculum for chronically ill cancer patients, things like that. So we have a big vision of how we can try to meet the needs of as many different trauma brains as we can in our country.
Yeah, you all are doing great work in a lot of different spaces and really working to bring some of this trauma-informed care to a lot of different audiences, and which is incredibly important. You talked a lot about why that's important. One of the things that we talked about, Erin, was that your approach to training may be a little bit different than some other training that gets created. And in that, you're always focused on building emotional intelligence. We know that this is a key skill. It's an underpinning to everything else that we do in life. And so that is a key focus for you all, no matter what the training is. So how are you doing that? I think there is something there that other organizations might want to learn from and even potentially replicate in some way. So how do you build emotional intelligence in your training?
Yeah. I think for me, the best way to answer that is to really, that we delve deep into how your brain works and then understanding your broad spectrum of emotions. Everything that we teach is very much grounded in DBT and CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy. So I'll give you a very concrete example. I grew up in a very angry house. Even to this day, if you stick me in a room with my father, we will probably end up yelling at each other. And so I am a very sensitive human being, so I've always been in tune and empathetic and stuff, but I still could go from 0 to 60 in my anger and be very reactive and very unsure of even what I was often angry about, just feeling anger in my body and just like projecting on others. And once I started doing this work myself, I realized, oh, that's a trauma response of my own. And it's not actually, A, it's not productive. It's not getting me the results I'm hoping for. B, it's really damaging a lot of my relationships. And C, all it's doing is really causing me to have a lot of mental health challenges personally and internally, like feeling guilt or feeling misunderstood, things like that. So I'll give you an example with anger. I did what's called an anger iceberg when I was in the mental health facility. And at the time, we were deep in the stay-at-home part of the pandemic. And so I was around my kids 24/7. And I have learned that for me, I am very triggered by clutter and messes. It's very much like a noise before I can get to work or feeling calm in my body. If there's clutter, I have to clean it. And so I recognized I was getting really angry at my kids constantly. It was just like yelling and screaming and cursing and was like, pick up your crap everywhere. And realized this is not who I wanted to be. And so one day in the facility, we did the anger iceberg. So it's just a picture of an iceberg. At the very top, I put anger. And then at the very bottom, she said, the person who was walking me through this exercise said, okay, take all of the other emotions that you are actually feeling in that time. So when I'm feeling frustrated with my kids and their messes. And she gave me an emotion wheel, which I highly suggest we all check out emotion wheel more. I think sometimes we stifle ourselves in thinking that we have just angry, mad, happy, sad, and those very basic emotions. But in the iceberg, I was able to identify that it's not just that I'm angry about my kids' mess, but I feel unheard. I feel unappreciated. I feel disrespected. I feel not taken care of. I felt like all of these much deeper emotions. And I realized I wasn't even reacting in that way. I was reacting out of straight anger, not hurt or not being misunderstood or any of these other emotions. And when I was able to articulate those emotions, those deeper, broader, more accurate emotions to my children, they were like, oh, Mom, we don't mean to make you feel that way. We'll pick up our mess. And it was like super easy to just fix the problem when I understood my broad spectrum of my emotions and I understood how to separate myself from the anger that I was presenting as and really understand the emotions I was truly feeling. And I think that I always say that these kind of skills and tools, like when you get a new car, nobody has a car before you get the car, and then you get the car and everybody has the car and you're like, what in the world? Nobody had this car before. I think the same thing when you do, quote unquote, do the work. And so ever since I learned that skill in my own being about anger and how I am projecting and pointing my anger in the wrong places, I see that in people around us in society where I'm like, I don't think you're actually mad at that. I think you're actually mad at this, that, or the other thing. And so I think it's important for humanity. I think that especially in a day and age where things are so busy, it's hard to sometimes stop and even process, am I mad at this thing, or is it the other things that happened before, or is it a trigger from another experience in my childhood, or what is my actual emotion even in this moment?
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective. So when you're building emotional intelligence in your training, you're talking about how the brain works. It's built on some of the theory that's there as well. I'm really curious, though, are there tactical, practical things that you're doing? Are you bringing in the emotions wheel into your training? What does that look like to actually build that emotional intelligence skill?
Yeah, everything that we are producing is a computer-based curriculum, because I always say accessibility is equitability. And so if we can get on technology, we can get out to as many people as humanly possible. We have an emotion wheels that will come up in our various lessons and things like that. And it's a lot of times with the mental health stuff, it's even just asking questions to bring your understanding to a different part of your own journey. So a lot of our curriculum is asking guiding questions, challenging certain narratives that are typically very human, right? Like the defaulting to specific emotions that are maybe not the most accurate depiction of what we're feeling. It's about understanding, like, what is a coping skill? Why do we need a coping skill? When do you know that you need to use this coping skill? What are your signs and symptoms before you get to a space of being, I don't know, let's say angry? How can I tell I'm starting to get frustrated or angry? And how can I circumvent the big explosion that would happen if I was angry? For me personally, it's like my hands get clammy. My brain starts racing. I notice in my own thoughts, I don't have complete thoughts when I'm angry. They're very abbreviated, or sometimes I just can't even finish a thought. It's like, I also notice like I have stomach stuff when I get some of those harder emotions, anger or anxiety or frustration or whatever. And so it's paying attention to those emotions so that you can really start to implement coping skills prior to you being out of control of your emotions. And it's interesting to talk about emotions too, because I think that I was on a podcast last week and the guy was like, too many people are emotional. Everybody's thinking out of emotions. And I actually think that we need to, instead of stopping before we feel the emotion, I actually think we need to go through the emotion and then get to the other side and be more logical on the other side, because then we are really using that frontal lobe to make those decisions instead of stopping ourselves before we even get through that thought process. Anyway,
yeah,
that's what we're doing.
That makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense to provide things like the emotion wheel as a tool in that process. But then I can really appreciate that you're asking those guided questions, though you're challenging those narratives, helping people identify those signs early on, and then doing all that really before you even get into coping skills, which is probably where a lot of people want to be, right? How do you deal with the situation? How do you handle the situation?
Well,
you've got to go through all the other stuff. first.
And I'll tell you, I don't mean to interrupt you, Heather, but I'll tell you, as a person who is married to a police officer, I feel like coping skills is 95% of his job. When we talk about the most extreme or hardest behaviors or challenges that we're seeing in society, it oftentimes comes down to a lack of understanding of people's own coping skills or how to utilize coping skills. I think that my husband would probably say that majority of his job is teaching coping skills to adults because they never learned it when they were kids.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's a lot of interactions and a lot of situations that require coping skills. So, since you've been incorporating emotional intelligence into your training offerings, what results have you seen from that?
Yeah, I can speak directly as an educator when I would teach this in my classroom as well. Our actual online curriculum hasn't been put out into the world yet, but I have definitely taught this for years and years on end. I've taught it with my own children. And I would say that I'll tell a story actually. My son, he was changing the kitty litter a couple of years ago, and he came up and he was like crying. He's, Mom, this cat's sick and this is so gross. I can't do it. And I said, Bud, I need you to stop for a second. And I need you to step back and say to yourself, am I making this harder on myself? Or is this task actually that hard? And he was like, as a kid, he's grumpy that I gave him a suggestion, whatever. So he went back downstairs. He cleaned the kitty litter. He came back upstairs. And he's, Mom, I thought about what you said and you were right. I was making the situation a lot harder on myself. If I just stopped getting in my own thoughts and spiraling, it really wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But I made it exponentially bigger on myself. I've seen this time and time again with kids and even in adults, we see the tunnel vision when we're feeling hard emotions. And we stop being able to really depict and understand all of the different details of our lives that would help us make a good, sound decision. And when we're in that frontal lobe, we are more able to see all of the details of the situation to make a good choice. And I've seen a lot of kids where we do breath work. I say, my kids who are on the spectrum, look at me somewhere if they don't look me in my eyes, that's okay, but look somewhere close to me. So I know I'm in your tunnel vision. It's not something else in your tunnel vision. And let's breathe together. And then let's talk about questions. Why is that so hard for you? Is there a better way that you could solve it? Is there something that you could do to take care of yourself better in these situations? Things like that. And I have seen kids who are the most reactive kids that you probably would see in a classroom become the most grounded kids who are able to really not only coach themselves through some of these hard interactions with their peers, but then they become like peer mediators for each other and they help coach each other. So I have seen how within a year of a student really having these structures and these questions and these sort of pushing those narratives that we internally always have and really understanding themselves in a deeper way, get to a place where they're really able to avoid conflict completely, or the conflict doesn't send them into such a tailspin that they're incapable of attending the schoolwork or the relationships or whatever. They become very secondary and are no longer the main focus in their lives, but something that's just part of life versus it's so hard, it's taking over my whole life.
Yeah, I love that.
I was just going to talk really quickly also that sorry, Heather, we also have a partnership with a company called Avos Marketing, and they are formerly incarcerated men who have created this organization. And they're going into our penitentiary, our prisons and jails and all these places and doing TBI screeners and really helping our incarcerated folks understand how to do this work. And I'm joining them in that work. We're going to go into our prisons and start teaching hopefully soon in the new year. But it's exciting to see that we know how it works with kids. We've been doing this emotional intelligence work with kids for a lot of education. But it's exciting to see it starting to pop up into some of these adult spaces and seeing it do the exact same thing that we are seeing it did with our kids. And like I said, those gentlemen that we're working with, they're formerly incarcerated. And after they were able to go through these sort of all DBT, CBT kind of skills and tools, they feel like they were able to get their brains refiled, reorganize, get their lives back on track and keep themselves out of the criminal justice system because they have reorganized that filing cabinet.
Yeah, the results are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone who's listening, let's say they want to get started with emotional intelligence, either for themselves or they're thinking about how can I bring this into my organization? What do you recommend? Where do you recommend they start?
Definitely reach out to us because we are trying to get out into as many spaces as possible. And I think that we provide a great curriculum for exactly that because it's flexible. It's low cost or free depending on demographics. It's something that people can do at their own pace. It's something that you can do throughout your whole life. I personally, when I went to the mental health facility, I put everything in a binder and I refer back to it on the regular to be able to increase my knowledge in a certain situation. So if something gets really challenging in my life, I'm like, okay, what skills do I need to do to really make sure I'm not stressed going through this? I think that honestly, even doing simple things like making sure you're following people who are aware of these skills and tools is a great start. I think that seeing reels that help you understand what boundaries are in 30 seconds are even a great start to start doing this work. I think that dipping our toes in, however, makes the most sense for you is always great. I'm a big proponent of therapy. I think everyone should go to therapy no matter what your journey is. I think that's always a great space to start doing this type of work because your therapist will guide you through a lot of these sort of exercises as well. I would say also reading some books. There's definitely some amazing books that I have personally used in my own practice, but I also recommend on the regular, like Your Body Keeps the Score. I think a lot of people can relate to that book because in modern day society, I think we all feel pains and aches and we feel general sickness, and it's hard to sometimes identify. And I think if we did more mental health work as a society, we would all feel so much healthier as well. So I guess my suggestion to anybody trying to get started is dip your toe into some reels, follow some people there, reach out to us at Undo if you want to get it in your organization or your company, read some books, do the work. I think that we hear people saying we need to do the work. And I think there's always this apprehension to do the work, but I have not met a single person in my journey that has done the work and regretted it. So any way in which you can start accessing the work is always a positive start.
There you go. Just get started.
Just get started.
Erin, thank you so much for joining me today. I know that you all are doing such great work at Undo, and I'm so excited to watch you grow and expand into new places. So thank you. Thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you.
And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Heather.
We often hear emotional intelligence as a key skill that's needed in the workplace. But how do we actually develop it? I appreciate Erin sharing their work at Undo and how they build emotional intelligence. I love the idea of using an emotions wheel. I've done that with clients before, especially when the training is tied to a change and they might be having some feelings about that change. I think it's a great way to reflect and start those conversations. And of course, guiding questions are great as well. I often design questions that help us reflect and share when we're developing any new skill. What I think is really unique is Erin's focus on helping people identify the things they may experience leading up to that emotional response. This brings such awareness to us in every situation. If we know our heart beats faster and we can recognize that, if we know our thoughts get cloudy and we can recognize that, we can start to intervene and start to use those coping skills earlier on in the process. I haven't seen a lot of organizations focusing on those two parts of emotional intelligence. So I love that Erin shared that with us today. I'm really curious, are you creating emotional intelligence in your nonprofit? I often see this come up in competency models, that there's a lot of focus on this just generally out there for the workplace. Are you creating emotional intelligence training in your nonprofit? If so, we want to hear what you're doing. So head over to the nonprofit L&D Collective and share with your peers from around the world. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good. Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.